Saddam, hello yogis and yoginis, welcome to the stream. Welcome back one more time to this study that we are doing on the Yoga Sutras. And today we're going to move onwards from the 1.19th and we will cover a bit more ground that we have been covering in the last videos. And the last videos we did a lot of detail, study, analysis, reflection, meditation, you can call it whatever you want, on the first sutras because they pack so much stuff and they are so dense and rich and they give us a perception of the whole path. And I'm not saying that the next following sutras don't do that as well, but in a way I am less familiar with them. And I wish this conversation was done here now with a large audience that could be other people who have studied the Yoga Sutras and they could bring ideas and I could listen to them and that it could enrich my understanding of them. Because right now, I only know what I've read. Again, I mentioned before, I haven't had any teacher directly explaining the Yoga Sutras to me, except in a few occasions, very few lines. So my understanding comes from what I read and some parts of my experience, and then calibrating that with the numbers. But I mean, when we talk about these experiences of samadhi, I haven't been to those levels, so I don't know when we are going to be talking about asampragnata samadhi, nirvija samadhi. I don't know. I mean, I can try to understand what it says, and I can have a feeling of what it means and an intuition about it, but that's as far as I can go. So we're going to keep on doing that, but I'm going to be quicker. Moving on to another section of the Yoga Sutras, which I have more, let's say, proficiency or experience, which is coming on the second part of the book, which is sadhanapada, the practice, the actual practice. No, this was the samadhipada, that was the beginning and the goal. So we're going to go moving a bit faster, but we want to honor what it says. And I was also considering to just not do this part and just leave it open and maybe in the future someday complement it. But I feel I decided not to do that because we never know when I'm going to retake this project, because I open a course and I try to complete the course and then I go to another course. Otherwise, if I leave too many things open, it would be feeling incomplete. So I'd rather just go very quickly over it. I don't even know if someday in the future I will feel more confident to say anything else about it. So how about I just say what I feel right now? And if in the future I feel that I can revisit some of these sutras and complement them in some way, then it will be a nice thing to see and also to appreciate if I have matured my understanding of them. So that's also my, this is my personal project. This is not, I didn't really call it a course because I'm not, I don't know, I'm more than teaching. I feel like I'm reading with you. So I'm teaching, but I'm also kind of a student at the same time as I'm reading all these sutras. Anyway, this is just to introduce that what we have seen until now, the 1 to 1.18, 1.1, 1.18, this was the most basic understanding of where we want to go and the different kinds of samadhi. And we ended up with that, talking about sampragnata samadhi, asampragnata samadhi, the different kinds of asampragnata as well, and pragnata and asampragnata. And we talked about other terms that were used for samadhi, like bija, nirvija, and sahaja samadhi, all those things. And let's see from the book where we were up until now. Let's come back to here. This was the 1.18, the last one we were exploring, where it was said that you can get to a sampragnata samadhi, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have cleared all your karmas. So by the firmly convinced practice of the complete cessation of the mental modifications, meaning the samadhi, the impressions only remain. So the samskaras were left here. Here it is. Yeah, there's some residues of samskaras, leaving samskara as a residue. So if there is a little bit of residue, this is not fully Nirbija Samadhi. There is a little bit of seed, even if the seeds may be rendered inert or impotent in some way. But this is where we were, and then when we go to the next line, now the following two lines, and this is also why I have introduced today's video with this, like manifesting that I'm not fully confident of what I'm reading, because some of the translations and commentaries on these following lines, they are quite dispar, and they feel like they don't fully agree, and I mean, this is the Yoga Sutras. You can interpret it in many ways, and you can find layers of meaning, but things that seem to contradict that doesn't. I don't see that often. So these following two lines, I'm not sure that they are agreeing to understand what they are talking about. Even like in the following later on when we come into Ishwara, and the term Ishwara, I've seen it described in different ways by different teachers. So let's read through this 1.19. Let's read Vivekananda, since I was just reading him. This samadhi, when not followed by extreme non-attachment, becomes the cause of the manifestation of the gods and of those who become merged in nature, of the remanifestation of the gods and of those who become merged in nature. It's quite difficult to understand. I have the book from Vivekananda, and I was reading the text that accompanies this. I think it helps a little bit, but it's not so easy to perceive it directly. Let's read some of other translations, and maybe we can have an idea what this is. Satchidananda, those who merely leave their physical bodies and attain the state of celestial beings, or those who get merged in nature, have rebirth. And let me just put this into the context of the next line as well, because the following line we'll see to the others. This asampragnata samadhi could come through faith, strength, memory, contemplation, or by discernment. So it's talking about two different people who can approach samadhi. Or let's say when you approach asampragnata samadhi, that it can have two different sides of it. One is when you still have those seeds. I mentioned before in the 2.18, sorry I cannot get the whole page on the image, but it's a really big book. My poor camera cannot see all of it at the same time. Let me actually check. Maybe I can zoom out a little bit. Can it zoom out? Oops. Wait. I think there was a way. Hold on a second. No, I'm in the maximum zoom out, so I cannot zoom out anymore. Anyway, because I want you to see that this is the 118 and what I'm looking at. In the 1.18, he was talking about that there is a residue of the samskaras. So it's talking about when there is that residue, you're going to have rebirth. So even if it's not, these seeds are not manifesting, then you're going to have to be born again. Let's read this one. They who have lost attachment to body or who have merged in nature attain this condition when they are born again. So if you have worked on this vairagya, the losing the attachment, and you have merged in nature, so you reach this state of samadhi in which you have detached yourself. When you have to be reborn, then you can come into this asampragnata samadhi. But again, this is saying you are being reborn, so you are not fully liberated. Let's remember the full liberation comes more from nirbija samadhi, when there is no seed. Let's read this one. This is the nature of existence for beings without gross physical bodies and for those who are absorbed in the womb of all life without waiting rebirth. So this is talking about out of the physical body. So you see, these translations are so different. Those who have attained higher levels, videhas, or know unmanifested nature, prakritilayas, are drawn into birth in this world by the remaining latent impressions of ignorance and more naturally come to these states of samadhi. So again, I think this one kind of agrees with what Satchidananda and Purohit is saying, which is basically that if you reach that state of asampragnata samadhi, but you are still left with some seeds, you are going to have to be reborn. But even if, when we come into this life, we have our memories erased, that in that new life, being reborn again, you have a very high chance to end up in this state again. You come back to this asampragnata samadhi. And then there's the others. To the others, remember, the others, they can attain it through faith, energy, memory, concentration, and discrimination. Let's read this one. To the others, this asampragnata samadhi could come through faith, strength, memory, contemplation, or by discernment. So if you have never achieved this state, if you've already achieved it, even if you have to reincarnate, it's high chance that you can come back to it. If you have never been there, there is these 5 ways to get there. Others follow a 5-fold systematic path of faithful certainty in the path, directing energy towards the practices, repeated memory of the path and the process of stilling the mind, training in deep concentration, and the pursuit of real knowledge by which the higher samadhi is attained. In the case of others, it is preceded by faith, energy, and memory in high intelligence. Yeah? Let's read Arya's translation. Let's read the 19 and 20. Samadhi naturally experienced at rebirth comes to that videha, those yogis who die after perfecting the Ananda-nugata, the ecstatic meditation, and to the Prakritilaya, yogis who have accomplished the Asmita-nugata, the meditation accompanied by I-amness. I guess this is relating to the Asmita Samadhi, yes? Having dissolved the awareness of matter, but without the final self-realization. I think is what I am understanding. No, so those who have been working and they have perfected themselves and they've been reaching different states of samadhi, but they have not fully liberated. They are not fully liberated without the final self-realization. Then they will come to experience this naturally in their next rebirth, and like videha, yogis who have attained a higher level. You can see this in Ishwara as well. Some who have attained the higher level. That's videha. Yeah, it's in here. Prakriti layanam. Yeah, so you have experienced a higher level within the prakriti, the realm of the gross, the material, and then if you reincarnate, then you're going to have a closer access to this asampragnata samadhi. Now the others, those who don't come, the samadhi of others in whose care it does not come right from birth. Yeah, so if we don't really incarnate directly into this capacity to access asampragnata samadhi, it's going to require a number of things. This effort is preceded by the practice and application of faith, strength, memory, meditation, and wisdom. Okay. So I think the image is becoming more clear, though you can read it in other ways as well, these commentaries. But basically that, sampragnata, if you reach that state, as you reincarnate, you come back to that state. If you don't come back to that state, then you can reach that state, asampragnata, through 5 levels. Let's remember, this is putting a little bit in contrast with sampragnata. And when we were talking about sampragnata, there were these 4 aspects of concentrating on the gross, that was tatarka, and then there was, vitarka samadhi, and then there was vichara samadhi, was more subtle, there was ananda samadhi, and then was asmita samadhi. So going through the bliss, and I was talking about the 5 koshas in the last video, and even beyond ananda, going to the I-amness of asmita, the asmita. So that is the path in sampragnata. in a Sampragnata, if you want to reach that state, then there is these 5 aspects that have to be worked on, developed. And that is the Virya, the Smriti, Samadhi, Pragya, and is that it? Is it just 4? No, I forgot Shraddha. Okay, I missed the first one. Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, and Pragya. And Shraddha is faith, and we're going to come back to the concept of faith in the next following lines, so I'm not going to talk much about this, but just to say that this is not, it's not a blind faith when it is said here. Maybe we will talk more about faith in a moment. Virya, and probably the word in English, virility, may probably come from a connection from this word, vir, to be powerful. Vir is also the warrior. So, indomitable energy, yeah, you have to be kind of a warrior in your approach towards these practices. You have to set your intention and put your energy to do this big effort. But that's kind of like a Shakti aspect. And this is what we talk a lot in the modern yoga, that yoga needs to combine both forces, Shakti and Bhakti. So it's interesting that as we come into this 1.20, Patanjali, in the very first 2 concepts, one is pure Bhakti, that's the faith aspect, and one is Shakti, which is the Virya, the warrior. So very interesting that he's telling you, it has to be Bhakti, there has to be Shakti, a combination of both. That's going to be helpful, yeah? Smriti is memory. Smriti is to remember or to, here it is, to remember or to recall. So to recall what? Well, a number of things. You have to be keeping constant memory of the name. Yeah, there's, if you read Guru Nanak in the book, in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib, or the other gurus, you can summarize all the teachings in just basically remember the name and vibrate the name within you. Just repeat the name, japa, japa. So smriti, this memory, comes to remember who we are, where do we come from, what is happening, and there is a higher force, and we can tune into that higher force, and we can surrender to that higher force, and to remember to do our practices, not to get lost in the material world. So smriti is a very important aspect. From this root, smriti, comes also the word simran, which is this constant state of meditation in which the presence of the name is vibrating within you constantly, yeah, without effort. But before we get to simran, you have to do some effort, vir, yeah, the warrior has to be here. And this is the practice, there is the meditation or the contemplation. We have been already talking about samadhi. This is all about samadhi, yeah? But then this is what you're doing, not just have faith, not just be a warrior, but all this in your path towards samadhi. And pragya, wisdom, yeah? and consciousness, to know. How is that? Pra is before or in front, and gya is to know. So, like, look, awakening of the wisdom is samprajñata samadhi. So pragya, like the root of prajñata samadhi. So all these things, 5 levels, 5 elements, are gonna help in the achievement of that state of samadhi when it is not already innate in you. When you're not already born into that state, then you would not even be watching these videos. You know, if you were already born in that state, you'd probably be doing something else. So those of us who still need to work to get there, then this is what it's telling us. These are the 5 aspects. All right. So that's 1.20. And then the following steps. I'm going to read this following from this one, Gyaneshwara. Yeah, we sometimes utilize his PDF because this is going to be more a shorter version and more compact. So let's see, we have read 19, we have read 20, and now we go into 21. Those who pursue their practices with intensity of feeling, vigor, and firm conviction achieve concentration and the fruits thereof more quickly compared to those of medium or lesser intensity. Wait, this is not... let me see. There we go. Hope we can see it better now. So it's just talking about intensity of your practice. It's gonna be you can do it with more conviction or medium conviction or lesser intensity. So here, this section, I'm also gonna be quite quick with it because Patanjali is saying, look, you can go slow, you can go medium, you can go fast. And you can study very light, or you can study medium, or you can study deeper. So it's like saying, okay, these are the ways to do it. And there's not much juice to extract out of this, I feel. Oh, sorry, not this one, this one. So for those with intense practices and intense convictions, he's saying, the practice can be intense or soft and medium. Conviction can be intense or soft or medium. No? So these are the three more subdivisions of the practice, those with mild intensity, medium intensity, and intense intensity. So these are the two components, conviction and practice. Conviction and practice, which is like the will that you put into your practice. Yeah? You have to, how many dedicated minutes do you put to that? How many hours do you spend doing your practices? How many mantras do you chant? How many minutes do you spend doing self-contemplation and self-inquiry? That's the practice, but also the conviction. If you do 3 minutes, but with not much conviction, well, that's one thing. But if you put an intense conviction on those 3 minutes, it's going to be different. So how much conviction do you put into your practice and how much practice do you actually do? I think it's pretty straightforward. And then Patanjali tells us about contemplation on Om. And this is the whole following section up until 1.29, which is what we will cover today. Let's read this. Maybe we will stop at some point, so maybe we'll just read it all and then discuss it. From a special process of devotion and let it go into the creative source from which we emerged, here it is the Ishvara Pranidhana I was mentioning, the coming of Samadhi is imminent. Let's read all and then we discuss it. The creative source, this Ishvara, is a particular consciousness, Purusha, that is unaffected by colorings, kleshas, actions, karmas, or results of those actions that happen when latent impressions stir and cause those actions. In that pure consciousness, Ishvara, the seat of omniscience, has reached its highest development and cannot be exceeded. From that consciousness, Ishvara, the ancient most teachers were taught, since it is not limited by the constraint of time. The secret word designating this creative source is the sound Om, called the Pranava. The sound is remembered with deep feeling for the meaning of what it represents. And from that remembering comes the realization of the individual self and the removal of obstacles. Okay? And actually, the following section that we will read in the following day will be the obstacles and the solutions. So that's what's coming next. But today we will only cover up to here. Let's read this. From that remembering, look, remembering already. Yeah, we already visit this concept of remembering. Also from the previous one, we were talking about this remembering as one of the 5 factors linked together with the faith, and we had them all here in this. Let me put them again. Yeah, the faith, the strength of the warrior, the memory, samadhi, and prajna. So it's talking about this memory here. So what do you have to remember? Through the chanting of Om and remembering the meaning behind the word, behind the sound, putting faith into that sound, that's a way to cross, a way to connect. From that remembering comes the realization of the individual self and the removal of obstacles. So it's telling us, look, there is 5 aspects that you need to develop in yourself to walk this path, and as the obstacles come, meditation with Om will help. here it says japa, japa. Yeah, japa in mantra practice is when you are repeating something. You take a mantra and you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And at some point, the practice becomes so ingrained within you that the mantra starts repeating by itself. That's called a japa jap. So repetition without doing the repetition yourself. So it's repeating by itself, let's say. So here Patanjali is recommending us to practice in the japa, in the memory, remembering the sound of the pranava, the om, the om sound. Now I have already a few videos talking about the om, so if you wanna explore more about om itself, I have a video on the mantra course, and I talk about the difference between om and ong, how to pronounce it, and we have quite a bit of practice in that video. So if you wish to practice the om, I recommend that you go to that one. And then we have another video where we talk about the what was that? The Mandukya Upanishad, one of the most fundamental Upanishads, and it's all about the om. So if you want to know more about the om, you can go to those. So this is about the meditation on the om, and then the other section was about the Ishvara. Yes, let's go back here. From a special process of devotion and letting go into the creative source from which we emerge, Ishvara Pranidhana, the coming of Samadhi is imminent. Ishvara Pranidhana. Now Pranidhana is the practice of the presence, sincerity, dedication, devotion, surrender of fruits of practice. Yeah, da from dana, da. See if I can do it. Da means to place or to put, and price forward. So to put forward, you are putting something in front. Yeah, and what are you putting forward? The Ishvara Pranidhana. So you're putting yourself in front of it, and you put this in front of anything. So anything that is in front of you, you see as Ishvara. This is like seeing God in all, and practicing the devotion through everything that you see around you. Everything is God, everything is Ishvara. This concept of God, Ishvara, which we're going to have to we'll explore a little bit more. The creative source, Ishvara, is a particular consciousness, Purusha, that is unaffected by colorings and actions. We will talk about the colorings, the kleshas, in the next section when we come into the obstacles, or results of those actions that happen when latent impressions stir and cause those actions. So remember, all this practice that we are doing is because we still have karma. These karma are these latent impressions that they are talking about. Now, when the latent impression stirs, and it's going to create some karma, and the karma is going to be affecting you. And this is our experience. The law of karma is applicable to everybody. So we all experience the coloring of our thoughts, the perception of the reality through the coloring that we have already established, and our reaction to that, and creation of karma based on that. And creating new karma creates more coloring, and so on and so on. Well, what Patanjali is telling us, look, this whole law of karma actually does not affect Ishvara. Ishvara is a Purusha, is a consciousness that is unaffected by the kleshas and the karmas. So this is the one part of the universe that is beyond all that law. It's not affecting it. Ishvara is not affected by coloring and karma. And he's saying that through the devotion to Ishvara, through putting Ishvara in front of you, and everything that you do, whatever happens in the world, you see Ishvara, you see God. Yeah, seeing God in all, or you don't see God at all. Yes, so you put Ishvara in everything that happens. And then you bring your faith and your devotion and your offering yourself. Yeah, in whatever you do is an offering towards that. Then that is what is going to bring. I keep switching the wrong camera. That's what's going to bring the samadhi as imminent. And that Ishvara, that is beyond the karmas and the kleshas, the seat of omniscience has reached its highest development and cannot be exceeded. So, So there's nothing beyond. There's nothing higher or farther than Ishvara. This is the highest that you can get as in terms of omniscience. And he says that it was Ishvara. It was actually this Purusha, this spirit, this form, if you wish, form of God. We will talk more about this in a moment. That all the ancient teachers were taught, because this is not constrained by time nor karma. Yeah. So we have a teacher, and I have a teacher. My teacher had a teacher, and his teacher had another teacher, and another. If you go back to the origins of time, where these teachings started to come into the planet, then these first teachers were receiving the teachings from Ishvara. And actually, you will find, depending on which tradition you are reading from, whether it's Samkhya or Vedanta or some other place, you will find Ishvara in different places taking a very elevated stage, a very, very important stage, though the work that Ishvara does might be different, and it might be understood and represented in different ways, but it is at the origin of all these teachings, so is the original teacher. And then Om and the practice on the Om comes from there. So this Ishvara concept, I was trying to read. So what is Ishvara exactly? What is it? What is that? God unmanifested? Is it God manifested? Is it all-pervading God? Is it God the creating, the creator, the sustainer, the destroyer, the God? And it's not clear. And actually different branches, as I mentioned, will speak about Ishvara in different ways. Sometimes it is attributed to the creation aspect, and some will say that Ishvara is the when God manifests into Prakriti, so in the creation of Prakriti. But others will say that Ishvara is beyond the creation. I mean, let me just point this out. Purusha and Prakriti, the difference, right? Purusha is the spirit, and we can see this. If I got this diagram here. We talked about the law of cosmic manifestation in another video. We were talking about Samkhya philosophy and Purusha as the one God and the spirit. And then as this God decided for whatever, that this world was going to be created, this universe and the creation comes from Kar, that's Kriti. So then Prakriti is generated. So Purusha is the one spirit, and we were just reading right now from Patanjali that Ishvara is in relationship to this Purusha. But again, I've seen some other texts that say, well, Ishvara is the God manifested into the Prakriti. So that's kind of confusing. And other texts will say, no, Purusha is the creator, the generating G of the God. Or out of Brahman, in the one universal unmanifested God, comes Purusha, which is, Ishvara as the manifestation of God. And again, I think this just becomes an intellectual discussion. The moment that we start trying to figure out what is one God or what is another God, I think we have to remember that there is only one God. And there is many names that we can give to God, and we may experience it in many possible directions. And I think it makes sense that we would have many gods in the stories, because let's remember that these teachings would originate as stories that would be orally spoken. And if you want, there's no writing. We're talking about 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years ago. There was no writing system. So if you wanted to communicate an idea, a concept, and having a teaching embedded into that story, then if it's going to be communicated orally, you better make it appealing in some way. Easy for the person to understand it and to remember it. So the best way to communicate moral concepts or precepts, steps of practice, any of these teachings that we are now studying, the best way to do this is to embed it into a story. So when you tell a story to a kid, the kid is going to remember the story, and we understand the message of the story. And in order to make it appealing, then you create all these figures and these images. So there is Ganesha, and he has two tasks, but one of them is broken. And do you know the story how Ganesha broke his task? And all the kids will be, what? Why? What happened? Why does Ganesha has a task that is broken? And then you tell the story, and then you understand the wisdom and behind Ganesha, and you're like, oh wow, that's very interesting. So so Ganesha is a god. Well, Ganesha is an aspect of God. Ganesha is representing one concept. And sometimes Ganesha will be spoken as the removal of obstacles. So there will be another story and Ganesha is removing obstacles. So, so if someday in your life you have an obstacle you want removed, then he's telling you, well, remember Ganesha? Oh, yes. Okay, so let me pray to Ganesha. Om Ganapataye Namah. So you are calling on Ganesha Ganapati to help you and remove the obstacle. All right, well, I mean, that's useful for us as humans. But that Ganesha is not different from another version of God. So if we want to have, we have a different issue in life and we need a different aspect of the teachings to be applied, there's going to be another story. And we can call it kind of like fairy tales. Is like a little story that has been created for children to remember. And we are all like children, we humans. So we remember that story. Oh yes, maybe I need to pray to Krishna, or I need to pray to Shiva, or I need to pray to whatever, Lakshmi, or whatever face of God that we want to call. No, it's like saying, God, you are all compassion, you are all generosity, and please let me call upon you. I need your help, for example. So at the end of the day, there's just one high supreme intelligence that is guiding everything. And Patanjali will describe that as Ishwara, and he will refer to it as Ishwara. And if you go later on in other texts from philosophies that spring from the Yoga Sutras, they will sometimes even stay away from anything that has anything to do with God. So it will just be very, very practical. You do these practices and get liberated. Don't even worry about God. Just do these practices, which is all right. I mean, it's an approach, but then you are stripping the practices from the faith. So you get only the Shakti and not the Bhakti. And that's very dangerous, because then you can get attached to some of the powers, for example, that may come with these practices, like the siddhis that, Patanjali will explore in the third part of the book. So, if we look at Patanjali, he does not strip it away from God, but he calls it the Ishvara. So you can call it whatever you want. You can call it God, Allah, or, Dios, whatever word you use, doesn't matter. And there will be different ways to explain what God is. But at the end of the day, the important thing is that you have a direct relationship to that. And the relationship that Patanjali is recommending, says, look, Purusha, it's a consciousness. So relate to that state of consciousness, and that's it. And the beautiful thing about the way that Patanjali does it is that by saying it like this, he takes away any kind of dogma behind these teachings and any kind of alignment with a particular religion, let's say. So you can do this yoga from Patanjali and be a Christian, or you can be a Muslim, and you can imagine that this Ishvara that you are calling is Allah. It's just the way that is being expressed through Patanjali's lips. But you can have your own practice of yoga and at the same time stay aligned with your religion. So that's what I have to say about Ishvara. And I think that's enough. In any case, we have these different aspects. Let's remember one more time these 5 different forces. For those of us who are born into this lifetime and we are not in a Sampragnata Samadhi straight away, then there is the faith, and that's the bhakti, there is the virya, the strength and the power of the warrior, memory, and you have to remember, and the remembrance has to be with a certain, as a practice and with intensity and conviction. That's what the other sutras were telling us, to get to this state of samadhi and find the wisdom. There we go. That's the summary of 1.19 to 1.29. In the following video, we will cover some of the obstacles and overcoming those obstacles. And we are very, very close to getting to the actual practice, the second part of the book, which is very exciting. I'm looking forward to that one as well. Thank you very much for today. And keep practicing, keep meditating, keep this inside yourself. And sorry, I just saw your message now, Isabel, because I had my book on top of the page and I couldn't see on my screen, and I couldn't see your message. But Satnam, hello. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you everyone who is supporting the stream and members. And see you next time. Satnam.